listing the hospital where he was in residency before he was fully a doctor, where he talked to the doctors and nurses, and people are coming in bleeding out, and they're saying it's Ebola, and they're whisking them away and saying shut up about it. I mean, it's just huge news. And telling them say that it's something else that doesn't even have those symptoms. So that's coming up. So thank you, Phil, who's a physician, and others for holding. I want to hear from you, Jeff, who's a firefighter, Ben, environmental health worker. Our guest right now is Mr. Dent. Let's get into the free chapter you've got up for all the listeners. I appreciate you doing that at harrydent.com/Alex Jones. China, Chapter 10, the China disaster ahead.
Yeah, Alex, this did not make it in time for the U.S. version of the demographic clip, but it did make it in my Asian book. So I want to make sure people can get this chapter. So you can get it free at harrydent.com/unpublished or by going to /Alex Jones. This is the biggest story of our time. China has become the second largest country. It's been the fastest growing country. People don't understand how much that economy is manipulated, top down, centrally planned, more than any economy ever in history. They have moved 15% of their population, 220 million people in the last 15 years, the biggest push of migration, urban migration in all of history. Hey, it's natural to do that up to a certain point. This is massive. It's overdone. They've moved these people to cities with no skills. They have them build more apartments and infrastructures and industrial plants for nobody. China right now, and it's not just me, the top economists that study this are saying the same thing, a few of the few that are willing to admit it. They have 30 to 50% more industrial capacity than they need. Infrastructures, bridges, railroads, roads to nowhere that make any other place look like nothing. 27% of their urban homes are vacant. They have built enough infrastructure and housing and offices and all this stuff for the next 12 to 15 years, even at the highest migration rates in history, which no way is going to continue. The China bubble is going to burst. These 220 million unskilled people are not even legal citizens in the cities they're in, only in their rural areas. I think not only is this migration going to stop and this overbuilding is going to collapse on itself, but a lot of these rural people have to move back to rural areas if they're left and haven't paved over them already with empty condos. But China is the largest, most obvious bubble in all of modern history, and everybody thinks China's just fine, and loves the fact that their government drives their economy and thinks the government won't let it fail. I was in Dubai in 2006 and 2007 speaking at two major conferences just before that bubble burst. I said this bubble's going to burst, the greatest overbuilding in the world before China. They said, no, the government won't let it. And I said, oh, you're really in trouble. 2008, it burst. China is going to burst. It's already starting to burst. It will reverberate around the world more than the subprime crisis and the banking crisis in the U.S. back in 2008. You got to get this chapter. I go to it in depth. This is the biggest thing that's going to happen. The other thing, Alex, just to bring it up while I'm at it, Germany. In the late 80s, 88, 89, I said Japan's going to fall off a cliff and collapse in the 90s, while the U.S. and Europe have the strongest demographic baby boom spending trend in history. That's exactly what happened. Germany has a worse demographic slowdown from 2014 to 2022 than Japan had in the 90s, and worse than any country in Europe, and many follow it. Germany is going to lead Europe down. And like we mentioned earlier, Germany is the only country smart enough to say that endless money printing is not the way to deal with this crisis. Debt restructuring. The reality is they're smart enough on that, but guess what? They're supposed to hold Europe together. They are going to keep falling apart. You think they're hesitant to QE or hesitant to bail out Southern European countries? Now wait until their economy keeps failing. And in the last few quarters, Germany has done nothing but disappoint.
That's right. Final segment with our guest, harrydent.com/Alex Jones to find the free chapter or get the book, and then your phone call. Stay with us. I'm your host, Alex Jones. Here's some of the headlines. FBI and DHS issue bulletin warning of IS attacks on police in U.S. I've been saying for 4 years that al-Qaeda forces funded by the West, getting Stinger missiles from the West to attack Assad and Libya and everybody else, would end up coming over here. Now it's happening. Look what happened in Canada yesterday. We've got an investigative journalist joining us at the bottom of the hour, Dan Dix, from Ottawa to break that down. Also, Ebola inevitable from U.S. southern border is basically what Southcom is now saying, but it's wide open. George Soros calls for war with Russia, a Kurt Nimmo story. No refusal blood draw checkpoint planned for Ohio. Protesters who plan to smash police brutality pumpkins arrested for littering and assault. Well, they were throwing the pumpkins across police lines in the direction of police. I mean, it's just asking for us. We got Ebola in the country, folks. We need to Ferguson stuff needs to stop. Australian government funds a new play called Kill Climate Deniers. Weather Channel co-founder, effort to prove global warming is man-made has failed. Calibration error changes GOP votes to Democrats in Illinois County. Fox News, yeah, I'm sure that's what's really going on. That's some of the news up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Democrats are racing away from Obama right now, and he's being booed, and folks are walking off at the few fundraisers he comes to. The New York Times said yesterday, of course, that they are, quote, in a emergency situation, have hit the panic button and saying the president's not relevant. He's gone in 2 years. They're now race baiting heavily. DrudgeReport.com has articles and video of that unfolding from the Daily Caller. Going back to Harry Dent, economist, researcher, best-selling author, harrydent.com/Alex Jones. You can get his new book there on the site, the Demographic Cliff, that I absolutely agree with. In the time we've got left, what is your prognosis on Germany finishing up? What do you make of what's happening in the Ukraine, short-term, long-term, and then shifting back to the elections and what's happening here? What your view on Obama and what he might pull as a wild card in the economy?
Well, the first thing with Russia and Ukraine, we have a geopolitical cycle that I developed in late 2005 and early 2006 to add to my demographic cycles, because I realized it has a huge impact on stock valuations, and this shifts about every 18 years. 1983 to 2000, nothing went wrong in the world. We had one quick war with Saddam Hussein, attacked him, backed out, no big deal. 2001 forward, we know what happened. 9/11, and then the Iraqi war that was serious, occupation, Afghan war that really failed, Middle East, one Arab Spring and revolt after the next, Israel and Hamas, and the Gaza Strip. And now we have something more serious, Russia moving into Ukraine. Obviously, they want to restore the Soviet Union. They are one of the worst demographic countries ahead, a declining power, but they still have the only real offensive force in the world outside the United States. So this is a mini World War III possible. This geopolitical cycle points down from 2001 into at least late 2019, early 2020, which means we got 5 more years of this getting worse. So
and by the way,
you think this is about over? It's not.
I mean, just to back up what you're saying, look at the Ministry of Defense report from 2007, the London Guardian reported on, Revolution, Flash Mobs, and Brain Chips, A Grim Vision of the Future. And then you can actually read the report from the Ministry of Defense, Future Strategic Context Planning. They predict basically 2015, 2016 through 2022 or so, global meltdown, just absolute insane terrorism, wars, you name it. The Pentagon then declassified last year a report from the same year saying what you're saying what I'm saying. It's not like we're being pessimists. We're saying folks need to be ready for this in these cycles. But the elites know this. George Soros knows this. The CIA people I know, Pentagon people, high level, all know this. Billionaires I know this. All the real analysts know this. So you've got separate real analysts like you who are out there talking to real investors, institutional investors, retail investors that are smart enough to research. Then you've got the CNBC crowd that's kind of got its own brand of hype with Jim Cramer up there. But even some truth comes out on those shows now about how we have a crony centralized system. I mean, how can you be so accurate? And we know what's going on. The Pentagon knows what's going on, but we're not really hearing this message